Basically, the inspiration behind all the tools is twofold. One is I saw a gaping hole in the lack of innovative tools in the garden. I happen to be living in Costa Rica, and at the local hardware store, you see the same thing that you see in the US and I'm sure in Europe. You know, you have your typical little shovel, which a lot of you call a trowel, and I'll argue about that. But, so you have the little shovel and you have the little 3-prong rake, maybe even a 5-prong rake, and a 3-prong fork. And you see a lot of manufacturers put all these 3 tools on different handles. But generally speaking, all those handles are a stick. You know, it's a straight stick, might be a little bit longer than another. On occasion, you'll see a little detail or a rope at the end. So, number one thought that came to mind when I saw this huge hole in the market was I can design a whole line of beautiful garden tools inspired by nature, flora and fauna. As I may have mentioned before, the flora being a plant, a tree trunk, a root. Here's a for instance, this is our maguey shovel, and we've articulated the agave or the maguey agave plant in that leaf, and this has a very unique asymmetric twist to it. But as you look at that, that's an elegant shape. That's another focus of mine. I have 2 things in mind when I design a tool. And I could say they're number 1 and 2, but that's not correct. They're both number 1. Number 1 is function. How is this tool going to function in the soil? How does it function with my body and my physiology? How does it affect the way I use it? And when I say I'm thinking about, am I a little girl? Am I an old man? Am I hunched over? Am I restricted to a chair? All these things come into play in design, which is my passion. Whether it's a home, an article, to use, a tool, all of these affect my design process. So what we also have here is a hand-carved handle. These are all hand-carved, one at a time with mesquite. Now, mesquite, for your knowledge, is about twice as hard as your typical oak, your red oak or white oak, and twice as hard as teak, twice as hard as ash. And that's why I selected it. It's super durable. This should last for centuries, literally centuries. And the same thing with the bronze. These are investment cast bronze, and the reason we use, it's a lost wax method. It's an ancient method that's been known for 5,000 years. And that has a very indigenous and earthy and grounded feel to me. I didn't want plastic in any of our tools. So all of our tools are made with natural elements. They're all handmade, one at a time. And the investment casting is quite different than, not ridiculously different than sand casting. So if I'm making a big church bell, I can sand cast that. And it's a relatively quick process because there's no tooling required. Now with lost wax bronze, whether you're a sculptor, you know this, we make a silicone mold of the shape. I first sculpt every one of these tools I've sculpted personally in wax, and then I modify it and I test it. We'll do a quick casting, and I'll put it on I'll attach it to a handle. Generally, I just screw it on the handle, and then I go out there and I use that tool. And I'm thinking again, am I restricted to a chair? What am I working in? Am I standing up? Am I kneeling? Am I reaching across a standing bed? Am I working in a planter like this? So what task am I trying to accomplish? All these things affect the design and what each tool does. So that we have our shovels. We have the Tortuga shovel. Of course, I try to incorporate, or what's the word when you biomimicry? I'm mimicking nature in many ways. That shovel shell, the shell of a Tortuga, happens to make a great shape for a shovel. This shovel has a serrated edge, which is meant to cut through the soil. Now, one of my pet peeves is people explaining tools and not using them in the dirt. So I'll have other videos to follow, and I'll be using these in the soil, showing you exactly how they work.